I will start with thanking you all for having me today. It's really an honor, and like Sue just said, I'm so impressed that there's so many people still sitting in the room and the sun is out and it's the last session on the last day, and that's just so amazing to me that there weren't suitcases rolling out the door. And that really is a testament to how much you all love your job and how much NANT has grown in the last almost 10 years, right? We'll be soon next year. So it's really inspirational to me, being a NICU parent, to see all of you, here and listening and wanting to hear a parent story. So I want to thank you for that. And I've learned so much in the last couple of days, honestly, talking to a lot of you at the different events, and it's very, very impressive. So during your first presentation, I do want to add that I started to cry. I'm sure some of you also felt the same way. But when Dr. Jan Brunstrom Hernandez, I hope I said her name right, said that she was raised by a therapist, I was crying because I feel that way about my daughter. Her first 5 years of life were very much the same. And her therapists have become our family friends. They have become friends with each other because they were always running into each other, coming in and out of my house. And up until last year, that was the case. So I really did appreciate what she said, and it's so important, all the work that you guys do. I also met someone who lives or used to live in my hometown, which is very impressive because no one else has heard of Mahopac, New York. So that was exciting for me. Anyway, you can see from the title of my presentation, which I know is really long, but it tells you exactly what I want to talk about today. And, oops. Okay. I really have nothing to disclose. I have no financial relationship with NANT, and my views do not reflect any of the views of the members of NANT, necessarily. So I hope to meet the following objectives today. I want to explain to you what it's like to be a NICU parent who suffered through a life-threatening pregnancy and a premature birth, and how that impacts relationships, emotions, and decision-making. I want to describe what is going on in the mind of a NICU parent as they watch from the sidelines as other people take care of their baby. Oops. And I also want to list some strategies that will help you gain the trust of the parent and also keep the trust of the parent, because that will always increase the likelihood of the best outcome for the baby. Okay. I'll start with my story. So I was 17 weeks pregnant and on an overnight field trip with my students. I teach high school biology and earth science and anatomy in a small town about 45 minutes north of New York City. This wasn't just my 14th year teaching, it was also my 4th pregnancy, so I thought I was seasoned at both. My life was great, truly. I take my students on this field trip to the wilderness every year to not only expose them to the trees and the fresh air and get them out of their normal environment, but also to remove them from the wonders of technology that they seem to have attached to them all the time. And it works. We take their phones for half the day, we take them at night, and it really does get them away from that for a short period of time. We build forts out of branches. We navigate with real compasses, not the ones on their phone. We track animal footprints. We call to owls. That I do use an app for, I will say. But they usually answer back, and they play manhunt in the dark, and it's a fabulous trip. So this particular year, I decided to not take the 2-mile hike with the group that we usually do. And I also drove my own car. I usually take the school bus, but I didn't because I was pregnant, even though at the moment things were fine. And I also had 3 other kids, and in case there was some kind of emergency or someone was sick, I wanted to be able to leave. So I drove my own car. My pregnancy was going really well at that time, but like I said, I was just afraid in case something bad would happen. And we had a great day outside. It was fabulous. I didn't do any hiking. I was really kind of hanging out in the main cabin with the kids. And then later that night, once everyone was falling off to sleep, I wasn't tired because I hadn't done too much, so I was kind of up a little bit later. And in my cabin, I had 10 freshman girls, and I also had a sophomore helper. Her name was Sophia. And I fell asleep probably around 1 a.m. because, like I said, I wasn't too tired. And all of a sudden, at some point in the middle of the night, and it was dark, I woke up and I felt very, very strange. And it felt like I had peed in my pants, which I didn't do. And I grabbed my cell phone, which I did have, even though there was no signal. I grabbed my phone and I used it for a light, and I checked, and what I saw underneath me was very, very frightening. It looked as if someone had been brutally attacked underneath me, or something else, dire happened. But I didn't feel any pain, so it was hard to register, what was going on, because nothing was hurting me. So I woke up out of the bed, and I woke up Sophia, who was my sophomore helper at the time, and I asked her, to get up and sit up, and I had to talk to her about something important. And I told her that I had to go to the hospital, and I gave her the roster of all of the kids that, I wasn't thinking clearly. I gave her the roster of all of the kids that were in the cabin. I said, I'm going to the hospital. Please make sure you get everybody up, for breakfast, and that everybody is, in the dining hall at 7 a.m. And she did, she did that. So I left. What was really, really scary to me is, I'm sorry, it's not working. That was our cabin. We sent one before, I'm sorry. My car was about 3/4 of a mile down the mountain, and I didn't have the ability to call anybody else because we had no cell phone signal, and all of the cabins had locked from the inside. So I couldn't really go opening the door to speak to another adult because I would have to bang on the door, and I didn't want to do that in the middle of the night in the woods and scare all these kids that were in the cabin. So I decided to walk, and before I did that, I took out a pair of sweatpants that I had in my bag, and I took all of the towels that the girls that had showered before bed, because they smelled like a campfire and whatnot, they were kind of hanging on the outside of their bunks. And I took their towels, and I was mopping the floor, and I took the other towels that were clean, and I shoved them in my sweatpants as I was walking. And that whole walk down, is a blur. I can say for sure that as I was walking every single step, I would bleed a little bit more. And I walked all the way down to my car. So I get into my car, and I drive. And I drive down out, to the campsite. I drive straight by the security guard, which it would have made sense to stop, but I wasn't thinking clearly. I just had in my mind, I have to go. So I drove, and I drove all the way down to get on the highway. And I know this mountain is about 50 minutes from my house, but I know the area, and there was a hospital that was close by. I could have found it, but it didn't occur to me. And I drove straight to my local hospital, which was a country hospital at the time. What I didn't know or wasn't thinking properly is when I went and I drove to the hospital, and I did call my husband when I had a cell phone signal on the highway. I did call him. When I got to the hospital, I just parked in the main entrance of the hospital and got out of the car, and I'm just walking to the main entrance. Now, this hospital is a country hospital. It's not a major, trauma center. So I walk to the front door, and it's locked because nobody's there at, 3 or 4 in the morning, and at least in the front door at that time. And the emergency room, of course, was all the way around the back. But I had been bleeding so much that I just kind of passed out on the floor right in front of the main entrance. And I get a little choked up. Really, if you think about it, it's not comical, but what person in the world would do that? Who would drive, walk to their car, drive to front entrance? I lock my car, walk to the front entrance. But, me, and what I later, figured out is that I really was in shock. I was in shock about the whole situation, nervous, upset, but also for certain, I had bled a lot, and I think that led to a lot of the shock too. So it took about 2 hours for an ultrasound tech to come in because they were on call, middle of the night, country kind of hospital. So that whole time, my husband had arrived and just nervous. I assumed I lost my baby because how could I not have lost my baby considering all that I saw and felt and all that was going on. But when the ultrasound person came in, she did the exam and she said, no, your baby's great. Everything's fine and you're still pregnant. And I mean, like I didn't believe it, but I was watching this on the screen and it was, quite amazing. I needed a couple of transfusions at that time, not too many this time, just to replenish some of the blood that I lost. Unfortunately, I reacted to the very first one. I had never had a transfusion before, and it was itchy, and all this stuff going on, and shaking, and that needed a little bit of medical treatment for that. And I thought we were good, because the bleeding had slowed down, and I thought, okay, this was something terrible, but we're all gonna be fine. And then the bearers of bad news came in. It was like a team of them. And they marched in and sort of sat next to me in the bed, and they said that I definitely had a very advanced case of placenta previa that would likely advance into placenta percreta, increta, all other cretas. And I didn't know about any of those. And I am a science teacher, so I think I know things. And I hadn't heard of those. And they advised me to terminate my pregnancy. But I was feeling fine, so it really didn't make any sense to me. And it's really difficult to process that all of these bad things are happening to you and you don't feel it. Like there's no pain involved in it. So it's really hard to digest. So we didn't terminate at that point in time, although we had talked about it a bit, but I had stopped bleeding. And they said, well, if you stop bleeding and things progress okay, you should be fine. So I went home. They sent me home. And they sent me home on bed rest, which I stuck to for the most part. I really only got out of the bed probably every other day to take a very fast shower. I was pretty good about staying in the bed. And it was hard. I had my other kids at home. It was pretty difficult, but I did listen. I'm going to show you. Okay. So those are my 3 boys. This was taken about a week prior to all of this, so it was a good picture of the time. My son on your right is my oldest, Sean. Jack is on the left, and Shane was 3 in the middle. So they were 3, 5, and 7 at the time. So we really struggled with this, even the beginning part of bed rest, and the thought that they could lose their mother was very serious. So we really did nothing but talk about it. And then in the middle of the night, about a week after I was discharged, just as they said, having not been bleeding anymore, from my bed, it happened again. And it was almost like the same exact time in the middle of the night. No pain. I just felt, again, wet, like very wet. And I sat up, and I took a couple of steps to the bathroom, and I fell down. It was like so much coming out at one time. So that time was super scary, and we got brought back to the hospital, the same country hospital, and by ambulance this time, though. And we had been given the same advice. But right before they came in, they did the ultrasound, and they said the same thing. The baby is thriving. It's a girl. How wonderful. You have these boys. Here's your girl. And it's not the fact that she was a girl. We were expecting a boy. It would have made no difference in the world. But we were calling it for so long, and now it was a something, and we knew. And then after they tell you all this glorious news, they come back, and they advise you not to keep your pregnancy. I do want to stop for a second because we decided to keep the pregnancy, but I in no way would pass judgment on any other human being that decided not to. This was our very personal and very difficult choice, nobody else's. And we believed that, and we said if it got to the point that it would be between me and the pregnancy, then we would do it then. And we just didn't feel like we were there yet because the last time I stopped bleeding and things seemed to always, work itself out at that point in time. So we spent another, 2 weeks or so in the hospital. And this time I had many more transfusions, same conversations with the doctors, but it slowed down a bit and then stopped. And then I went home. They discharged me, my country hospital. And they said, we can't treat you anymore, at all. We don't have a trauma center. We don't have a NICU. They have what they call a well baby nursery. You never will come back here. This is it. And they wrote a note on a prescription pad and said, it will happen again. It's not if, it will happen again. Hopefully you can show them this note, and we had it on the refrigerator, to let the ambulance know to take you to the trauma center, which was 40 minutes away from my house. We can't guarantee they're gonna do that. They might bring you back here. We don't think we can stabilize you, so really try to convince them. So went on to the refrigerator. Yeah, that's the truth. That's how it went. Sorry, that's what they said. We're discharging your care. That was the phrase they used. So I went home, and even stricter. When I tell you I didn't move, I actually had the bedpan. My mom got me one. I didn't move. My aunt came and washed my hair for me, dried my hair. I really didn't move. And I was bleeding still, but it wasn't hemorrhaging. It was just bleeding, regular bleeding. I guess. I don't know. It's not really that funny, but it wasn't as bad. It didn't require me to go to the hospital. It was manageable. So 2 weeks later, same thing, middle of the night, like clockwork, it happened again. And this time was way worse. This time I stood up and I took a couple of steps. And I remember, call for my husband who was sleeping. I felt like every drop of blood inside me came out, everything. And I was dizzy. And I fell down. I actually hit my head on the marble in the bathroom, and I was out. I remember thinking for a minute, I hope I wake up because my boys were sleeping, and I imagine they were to wake up right now. It's excruciating, but they didn't. They never woke up any of these times, ironically. And when I woke up this time, I was hearing people yelling, and what it was my father-in-law, who is my neighbor. He was at my house, and he's yelling at the ambulance drivers, you have to take her to this trauma center. We have this note. You have to use this note. And they said, no, apparently there's a policy that they have to take you to your nearest hospital during an emergency, and that's too far away. So I'm on the gurney, and they're actually taking the bathroom door off its hinges to remove me on the gurney because it wouldn't fit. We have an old little country house. So we're bumping, going down the stairs. I was awake. And I looked over, and the ambulance driver was one of my former students. And he just came over to me, and he saw my name, and he knew, and he came over, and he was like, are you okay? And I grabbed him by his collar. I said, Tom, you are taking me to this medical center, and if you don't, I might bleed to death. Do you want me to bleed to death? And he was like, no, Mrs. Degl. And we went, and off we went. And it really is amazing the connections that you make with people. And I swear, really, if he wasn't the driver and we didn't have that connection, I don't think I would be here, today. And I don't think my daughter would be here today. So we go to the hospital, and now I am in this larger medical center. State-of-the-art care, around the clock, everybody. There's no on-call for this, everybody's there. And ultrasound was there immediately, and the neonatologists were coming and talking to me, expecting I was gonna deliver early. This was 21 weeks at the time. I had social workers coming in, nurses, all kinds of people. And this one other doctor, a woman doctor, kind of came in, and she took me by my hand, and she said, you're going to deliver your baby early, now, or very soon. and you're only at 21 weeks. And they don't survive at 21 weeks. What do you want us to do? How do you want us to handle it? And I was like, what do you mean? I'm going to be pregnant for longer every time this has happened so many times. Every time this happens, I stop bleeding. They give me all these transfusions. The baby's fine. I said, let me see the baby. So they do the ultrasound, and now I know it's a girl. So my daughter is happy. She has a little bit of a high, heart rate. No idea what's transpiring anywhere else in the world. She's just kind of in there. And I was given the same, advice again. And this time, we talked about it seriously before, but this time it was okay. We're just gonna go like day by day now. Like we're good now, but if I go into labor, then I go into labor, or if, the hemorrhage is too much, then the hemorrhage is too much. Like we had finally kind of come to terms with that. But I didn't. And had a lot of transfusions, just almost continuously. I can't really remember in the thought, but I'm pretty sure I just had them, because I always remember them being given to me. And I stayed there, and I was there for another 2 weeks and change. So the choice was made for me, like had been expected at 23 weeks. And I was lucky. I did get my steroid shots, so I had all of that, which was, I think, another crucial part of my daughter's success.